The journal was not lost. That was the thing that would keep Maya up for the rest of her life. The nights she still had left, that it had never been lost at all. It was simply filed. Eli found it for her by lunchtime. There was an archive on the 4th floor of the old administration building, a long climate-controlled room of acid-free boxes that the hospital's centennial historians had lovingly cataloged, and in box 1912D, between a folder of nursing rosters and a folder of dietary requisitions, sat a leather notebook labeled in a curator's careful hand, Oceana, G. Surgical Notes, incomplete. Donated 1913. Of limited medical interest. Maya almost laughed. She read it in the archive with gloves on while Eli stood watch at the door, and the laughter went out of her by the second page. The early entries were a surgeon's, dense and proud, wound closures, suture techniques, a running argument with a colleague in Boston about sepsis. Then, gradually, a second voice bled into the first, lower, more feverish, written later at night in a smaller hand.
The Boston specimens fail, all but the one. The one does not fail. Placed in the wound of the Kowalczyk woman a film of its living essence and her flesh closed in a single day, closed as the young close, as nothing closes at her age. The brothers will not ask how if the result is good. I will not tell them.
And then, pages later, the entry that made Maya's hands go cold inside the cotton gloves.
I have erred in the carriage of it. I believed the sea was its prison. The sea is its leash. Away from the salt it does not weaken, it wakes. It grows. It hungers in proportion to the distance from the water of its birth, and I have carried it 1,000 miles inland, into the very heart of the continent, the farthest a living thing of the deep has ever been dragged from its home, and here it has become a thing I cannot name and cannot cage. Salt quiets it. Salt shrinks it. But I have not salt enough in all of Minnesota to make it small again, and each day it is larger, and each day the leash is shorter in my hand. God forgive me, the essence is already in 40 wounds. It is already in the people. Whatever I have made it twice, once in the tank, and once in the blood of every patient I have closed. The first I may yet drown. The second walks out the doors and goes home.
Maya read the last line 3 times. The second walks out the doors and goes home.
Eli. What's in the regenerative medicine lab?
He turned from the door.
Vance's outfit? Tissue stuff. Wound healing, burn grafts. They're famous for it, half the reason this place still leads the rankings.
Something in her face stopped him.
Why?
Because I don't think anyone ever drowned the second thing he made. I think someone's been culturing it.
That was when the building's overhead speakers, which Maya had not heard make a sound all weekend, clicked on with the soft, toneless chime that precedes an announcement, and a recorded woman's voice said, with the calm of a thing rehearsed for disasters that were supposed to be fires.
Attention. Code Gray, East Tower, lower levels. Code Gray, East Tower, lower levels. Staff to your stations. This is not a drill.
It had not stayed in the tunnels. Later, when there were people writing reports with far more impressive letters after their names than Maya's, trying to assemble a timeline out of flooded camera footage and the accounts of people who would not stop shaking, they would fix the surfacing at 12:51 p.m. in the hydrotherapy pool on sublevel 1. The pool was warm and bright and full of saline, because saline was gentle on healing joints, and 3 patients were in it with 2 therapists when the drain at the deep end stopped being a drain. The water bulged. That was the word one of the therapists used, the one who lived, the word she kept using. It bulged. the whole pool humped up at the deep end like the back of something turning over in its sleep. And then the saline went pink, and then it went red, and then it went over the edge in a wave that carried the lane ropes and a wheelchair and one of the therapists out across the tile. And a sound came up out of the pool that everyone on sublevel 1 heard, and no one could describe except to say that it did not belong to the world they had woken up in that morning. What came up out of the pool, briefly, into the fluorescent light, before it folded back down into the water it had ridden up through, was seen by 4 people, and 4 people gave 4 different sizes, all of them too large. The smallest estimate was the length of a car. The therapist who lived said, simply, that it had been beautiful, in the way the underside of a wave is beautiful a half second before it breaks your bones, and that the worst part, the part she could not get past, was that as it went back down it had seemed unhurried, that it had surfaced into a room full of soft, helpless people and chosen, for now, to go back to the dark, the way a man steps into a pantry, sees it stocked, and decides to come back at dinner. It had been in salt water, the hydrotherapy saline, and in the salt water, for 90 seconds, it had been calm. Then it went back down into the freshwater pipes of the deep building, where there was no salt at all, and it began, again, to grow. By 2 o'clock the East Tower was in lockdown, and by 2 o'clock Maya understood that the lockdown was the wrong shape. She and Eli reached the incident command post, a conference room on the 2nd floor, hastily wired with radios, in time to hear a tall woman in a lab coat and good shoes overrule the head of security in a voice that did not rise and did not need to.
We do not flood the lower levels. We do not introduce brine into the building's water system. We do not, under any circumstances, breach the sub-level 2 cold storage. Containment, not eradication. Is that understood?
With respect, Doctor, we don't even have a word for what we have. And you're telling me the one thing it backed off from, we don't use?
I am telling you that there are assets on sub-level 2 that represent 40 years of work and that are worth more than this entire hospital, and that an uncontrolled introduction of high salinity solution into that environment would destroy them. We contain. We wait for it to settle. It has always settled before.
The room did not catch it. Maya did. And she felt the floor tilt under 12 years of training in what holds and what fails. It has always settled before. You do not say before about a thing that got loose yesterday. She looked at Eli and saw that he had heard it too, and that the old man's face had gone the gray of century-old cement, because his grandfather had told his father 3 things on his deathbed, and the one he'd passed down was don't let the salt run out, and the 2 he wouldn't repeat had just walked into the room wearing good shoes and a lab coat, and told a room full of frightened people not to use the one thing in the world that could save them. Maya stepped forward before she had decided to.
You knew it was down there. You've known the whole time.
Vance looked at her the way you look at a structural report you did not order.
And you are
The person. Who's going to ask you that again in front of the police? Why does your lab have salt enough to keep something the size of a car asleep? And why have you spent the last 2 days making sure nobody used it?